As a dark presence watched from the deepest shadows, a name Iris echoed through the forest, where a young girl was running for her very life, screaming for help as she was pursued by terrible monsters, her foot suddenly catching on the rough ground, sending her tumbling forward as she lost her balance, just as the monster closed in on her now helpless form, leaving her cornered, able to do nothing but stare in absolute fear. But then a blade sliced through the air with a sudden flash, striking the monster's arm with a decisive blow. As a savior descended from high above the trees, a skilled SWRDSWMAN landing gracefully among the creatures, who easily evaded a wild swing from one of the beasts, which growled in utter frustration at the miss, while the fallen girl watched on completely stunned, checking herself to find she was completely unharmed. Her rescuer now stood guard before her, a protective shield, this warrior ordering the monsters to get back, for this was Princess Irislune Aldnoa, a fated hero, her golden eyes marking a divine blessing upon her. But the monster just saw another piece of prey, and the princess had absolutely no time for this nonsense. Her blade igniting with a brilliant holy light. As she lunged forward to begin her attack, the beast prepared a counter of its own, and the blonde swordswoman leaped into the fray, her eyes filled with a grim and unwavering determination. Nimbly dodging the monster's clumsy attack, an orc readied its club for what it thought would be a fatal swing, but she just let out a defiant battle cry. And though the beast scoffed at her quick movements, her blade found a perfect opening in its defense. The creature grunted, clearly annoyed by the sudden pain, swinging its heavy club in a blind rage, but she confidently declared her impending victory, her sword slicing deep into its powerful arm. The other orcs could only stare in total shock, as the brute clutched its now useless limb, and she gave them one chance to surrender and flee, but they just screamed empty threats back at her. Then from behind her, armored knights emerged from the trees, causing the orcs to freeze with a sudden paralyzing fear, while a small child watched from the bushes, safe at last. As the remaining monsters turned and fled into the woods, the knights rushed to check on their leader Iris, who explained that her preemptive strike was absolutely necessary, and a knight admitted her plan was indeed perfect, so she suggested they talk more on the way back, but suddenly a chilling presence stopped her in her tracks. As she sensed a murderous intent far worse than any orc, and she knew that running was no longer an option, the noblewoman demanded the intruder reveal themselves, and from the shadows a monstrous creature began to appear, but in a sudden flash of smoke the threat vanished, leaving a mysterious masked man standing in its place. He claimed quite unconvincingly that he's not a suspicious person, and the woman was stunned into a momentary silence, though her shock quickly turned into deep suspicion. As she drew her sword demanding he disarm himself at once, he could sense her killing intent, knowing one wrong answer meant certain death, so when she questioned his strange mask he simply called it a hobby, and to show his peaceful intentions he set his weapon down on the ground. But his compliance only served to confuse her even more. He invited her closer, offering to show her his face, then immediately admitted how suspicious that must sound. And she agreed, finding his behavior far too strange to be trusted. Demanding to know why he showed such killing intent if he's not an enemy, he claimed it was just an accident, a mere slip of the hand, but her distrust skyrocketed as that's not a believable excuse at all. So she made her final demand: remove the mask and then they'll talk. The masked man seemed to consider her words for a moment, but a sudden scream shattered the tense standoff, as one of her knights was thrown through the air by a massive beast, and a horde of monsters emerged, mocking their apparent weakness. Iris told her fallen guard to retreat and save himself, while a boar man swung his club, scattering her soldiers, but the masked man just held up a hand, looking annoyed by the interruption, when suddenly the blonde woman shoved him hard to the side. He stumbled, caught completely off guard by her action, as she screamed at him to run, and the monster grabbed her, urging him to flee while he could, but he refused, blocking the descending club with his own sword. The beast stared down at him in utter disbelief, as he flexed his hand, confident in his own immense power, vowing that he won't let his companion Iris get hurt. The monster raised its weapon for what it believed would be the final blow, smashing it into the ground with devastating force, and the onlookers screamed, fearing for the princess's life, while the beast scoffed, declaring that all humans are weak. But through the dust they stood completely unharmed, causing the monster's jaw to drop in absolute shock. And Iris realized he must have cast an instantaneous magic barrier. As the beast still couldn't believe they were completely unscratched, our hero casually lifted his massive sword from his shoulder, telling Iris that any explanation would be wasted on these creatures, as a complex magic circle ignited in the air behind him, and he asked the beast if it's had its fun yet. Enraged, the monster swung its mace once again, pouring all of its remaining power into one final desperate attack, but he stood ready, declaring that it's his turn now. The masked man prepared for a more formal introduction, flashing back to a brutal fight against a different beast, where he removed the mask, introducing himself as Ugram, and the woman Iris was shocked by his golden eyes. She recognized him as the enemy prince, but he quickly silenced her, warning her to be quiet as her knights were approaching. But Iris demanded to know why the third prince was here in her lands, and Ugram's expression darkened as he prepared to give his answer. His eyes glinted menacingly as he said, "I came to kill." And in an instant her guards were all down on the ground around her, as he smirked, asking what she would do if that were actually true, leaving Iris completely frozen in shock. But she collected herself, ready to accept her fate, knowing the difference in their power was too great to resist. Yet she still held her ground defiantly, calling his bluff, sensing no real killing intent from him. He smiled, admitting it was all just a joke, moving closer as he explained it was merely a test. Because he wanted to see if she was a person he could actually reason with, and she was completely baffled by his strange logic. He leaned in close, revealing his true goal at last, explaining that he came to her kingdom to seek asylum, which left Iris utterly and completely confused. While Ugram's confident smile remained unwavering, he gave her a thumbs up, announcing his official defection, the black-haired man giving a confident, almost charming smile as the princess stared back in utter disbelief. Her shock echoing silently through the forest. On the ground, a fallen soldier lay perfectly still, and she realized the dead man was an imperial prince, turning to demand why he would do such a thing. But the man, now masked again, faced her calmly. He just smirked, offering a full explanation as the story flashed back 5 days earlier to a man waking up with a sudden start, finding himself in an unfamiliar, lavish room. He knew he was at home, not in some luxury hotel, until he caught his reflection in a nearby mirror and froze in absolute shock at what he saw, for he had become Ugram, a character he knew all too well. Ugram Albin, the popular villain from a fantasy novel he'd been reading, whose golden eyes marked him as a blessed child of God. But this seemingly perfect character had one fatal flaw. As he was destined for a final climactic confrontation, Ugram was in fact the final boss of the entire story, fated to be defeated by the hero in the end. And our boy realized his truly terrible predicament. For while he could live as a prince in luxury for a time, his path would inevitably end in a violent defeat. Worse still, this empire was corrupt to its very core, a fact made clear as a debt collector arrived demanding payment from a terrified couple who could only beg for mercy. But from his throne, the dark-haired man was unmoved. He overruled the collector's more lenient decision, his sentence delivered with a chilling finality: "You will take their place on the front lines." He laughed maniacally about the glory of the empire. But inside, a different soul was screaming in horror, trapped in the body of this irredeemable villain Ugram. Looking around at the opulent, hateful throne room, this corrupt nation was clearly beyond saving, and waiting for its eventual collapse seemed like his only option, until a sudden flash of inspiration struck him as he remembered the story's true protagonist, Queen Iris. His new plan was simple: escape and plead for asylum with her, imagining a peaceful life under her just and fair rule. Knowing that a defecting prince would be a huge asset to her cause, and with his mind made up, he moved to leave the room. He opened his door only to find 2 armored guards standing there, his heart sinking as his plan seemed to be failing already. But the guards just stared, confused by his sudden presence, before snapping to attention, addressing him as "Your Highness." He caught himself realizing he'd forgotten who he was supposed to be, and Ugram's cold, intimidating persona instantly returned, causing the guards to immediately shrink back in fear before they fled the room in a complete panic. He watched them, Geo, utterly confused by their reaction, knowing that something just happened, a strange power surging from deep within his body, and he realized what it was. It had to be magic, but his was unique, an endless internal source of power, and he wondered if he could learn to control it deliberately. So focusing his will, he reached out his hand, and a nearby statue shattered into 1,000 pieces. A wide smile spread across his face at this discovery, as he quickly changed out of his royal clothes, now dressed much more appropriately for an escape, and he found a magical storage pouch in the room, promptly packing the entire room's contents inside it. The main door was far too risky for an exit, so he leaped from the second-story window instead, channeling magic into his feet to cushion the landing, and he touched down on the ground without making a sound. But the guards on patrol below definitely heard something, scanning the area, though they found nothing at first, until suddenly their eyes widened in shock as he dropped from above with a powerful, decisive kick. He told them it was nothing personal, but he simply could not afford to be discovered here, and he looked out over the land, vowing to change its dark fate. He decided to make his escape under the cover of night, leaping silently across the city rooftops, activating his body enhancement skill to aid his flight. As magic flowed through him, sharpening all of his senses, he ran with a renewed sense of hope, refusing to simply die. And the sun rose on a brand new day, finding him still running after an entire night of pushing forward, until he finally stopped to catch his breath. Consulting his map, he confirmed he was on the right route, but his enhancement felt weak, barely active now, so he decided to train his magic while he took a rest, recalling a powerful defensive barrier from the original story, a magic wall, something that would be essential for his survival. But his first attempt to cast it failed completely, so he tried to visualize it, a thin film of pure energy, and something slowly began to form in the air above him. But the fragile barrier shattered almost instantly. Yet he knew if the hero could master it, then so could he, and he focused his mind, ready to try once again. But his training was suddenly and violently interrupted. 2 demonic wolves emerged from the dark forest, their fangs bared, ready to attack him. And he realized this was the perfect test for his new skills. As the pack lunged, a blur of claws and sharp teeth, he channeled his magic, preparing for an absolute defense, his companion shouting as he deployed a magic barrier, a glowing circle that stopped the beast's charge cold, and the monster recoiled, stunned by the powerful shield. Our boy analyzed the barrier's impressive power before turning to face the rest of the pack, and with a smirk he declared that it was his turn now, bracing himself as 2 more beasts lunged right at him. Dark energy began to gather around his blade, as he planned to strike beyond the shield's protective edge, and the blonde woman watched her eyes wide with amazement. As he attacked from inside the protective dome, a flash of steel cut cleanly through the air, and the beast howled in sudden sharp agony, its body dissolving into nothing but dark flames. As he pivoted, slashing at the next monster in line, he let out a breath, surprised by his own incredible skill, his body having moved exactly as he had willed it to. And he knew he must master his magic as quickly as possible. So he pushed himself, training even while on the move. His feet pounded against the forest floor, but he was still too slow deploying his enhancements, realizing how difficult multitasking with magic truly is, so he tried again, layering multiple spells all at once. A massive dome of energy erupted all around him, and he panted, realizing the spell's true immense power, catching his breath knowing the monsters were finally gone, and for a moment he could finally rest. But there was no time to waste on such luxuries, as he must master drawing power directly from his core, pushing himself into yet another grueling training session, his speed becoming unbelievable, a true rush of power. This was the true extent of Ugram's innate ability, and the days passed in a blur of relentless combat and training, until at last the royal capital was in sight. The sleepless journey having been absolutely brutal, but meeting Iris risked exposing his true identity, though he already had a plan for that. A simple mask to hide his recognizable face. And he ran toward the city, calling out her name. Suddenly, a familiar woman appeared right before him, and he maintained his cover, acting as the arrogant Ugram, telling her the simple reason for his being here was her Iris. He asked for a place in the royal palace, but she just grabbed his pointing finger and threatened to break it on the spot, causing him to immediately panic. He tried to explain his desperate situation, but she only heard demands, not proper negotiations. So he laid out his offer, valuable intel on the Empire, and he would lend his strength but for a price. The noblewoman was shocked by his sheer audacity, but he just grinned, calling it a perfect win-win plan, and she covered her mouth, completely flustered by his proposal. As she considered the alternative of them becoming enemies, their meeting here she thought must be fate, as he made a solemn vow not to harm her or her kingdom, and she quietly weighed his surprising promise, a small smile forming as she decided to trust him. She formally accepted his proposal. A single tear of relief falling from his eye, as she made a formal vow to the kneeling man, and the masked man internally celebrated his hard-won victory. She invited Prince Ugram to her kingdom, and Ugram coolly agreed to her generous terms, commending her for making such a wise choice, but she slyly asked what if she had tried to capture him instead. Ugram boasted that no one could ever catch the strongest, but a sudden shock ran through his arm, as Iris feigned surprise, saying it was just a little test, and he found himself suddenly bound in magical cuffs. Humiliated, Ugram glared down at her, straining against the powerful magical restraints, and she marveled at his monstrous, untamed power, but he dismissed the cuffs, demanding to be taken to the capital. The woman offered him a ride in the wagon, and he stared at the simple cart, completely amazed, eagerly asking the driver how to get on, as this was his first time and he was buzzing with excitement. With a small smile, she gave the order to depart, and he hopped into the back of the wagons. As the convoy finally began its journey to the capital, and a guard addressed him by his name, Ugram, she explained the trip would be short, under an hour, but she warned Ugram that his mask was far too suspicious, though he argued it was a magic artifact, not just a disguise, and she admitted she almost attacked him, thinking he was a monster. To avoid any conflict, he must cover his face, and Ugram reluctantly agreed, though he really liked his mask. As their party traveled onward toward the distant city, she warned him to behave as they passed through the main gate. He pulled up a hood, suggesting a new name for himself, and she smiled, agreeing to his clever little plan. As they approached the massive spiked portcullis of the city, and she proudly welcomed him to the royal capital, Luminous. Looked out, completely awestruck by the bustling streets, bouncing in the back of the cart, unable to contain his joy, and she asked for his first impression of her home. So he grinned, saying it was more wonderful than he ever imagined. The city was teeming with life, its people full of vibrant energy, a place that was nothing like the Empire's cold capital, and Iris just smiled at his infectious excitement, telling him it was now safe to remove his hood. They left the carriage with the soldiers, and he eagerly asked to go sightseeing right away, but Iris immediately shut him down, reminding him of the need to be discreet, but he just snapped the chain from his neck, telling her to pick him up later, and with that made a run for it. Shouting with joy, finally feeling free, he danced through the streets, completely overjoyed, his happiness almost infectious to those around him, as he was determined to enjoy this new life to the fullest. Approaching a street vendor's stall with a wide grin, but the locals were terrified of his strange appearance, and his freedom was cut short by the arrival of city guards. Though he insisted he was not a suspicious person, the guards thought his excuses were even more suspicious. A blade clanged against a sudden, unseen barrier, as Iris stepped in, shielding Yu from the guards, apologizing for her idiot guest's behavior, while Yu complained from right behind her back. The guards recognized her and apologized profusely, and he thanked Iris for getting him out of trouble, as the blonde noble declared she had finally caught him, so he suggested they explore the palace for secret passages, but she grabbed him, pulling him to a sudden stop, her expression a firm and absolute no, reminding him that this was not some kind of game. As they had only just arrived in the capital, But our boy thought it was a terrible waste of an adventure. He reluctantly gave in to her sound logic, and she offered a compromise they could explore later with permission, but there was a condition that she must accompany him, and he happily agreed, thanking Iris by her name. Iris walked ahead sighing at his childishness, glancing back thinking he was endearingly simple, and before a grand door she explained the proper protocol, warning him not to do anything to anger the king. The masked man gave a weary confirmation, as the throne room doors swung open wide, and a king on his throne welcomed Iris home, so she proudly reported the mission's complete success. The king was relieved to see her unharmed, but he brought up a grave concern: monster sightings were increasing, though Iris denied knowing anything about the cause, and the king accepted her answer burdened by the terrible news. She pledged to protect the kingdom and investigate the matter further, and he looked at her intently, a question forming in his eyes. As the masked man stood silently before the throne, and the princess explained that he was the one who defeated the monster, the court was stunned by this shocking revelation, and the king offered a reward asking for his name, but our boy hesitated to reveal his true identity until a gentle hand stopped him. She gave him a look of quiet support, vouching for the king's trustworthiness, and he understood her silent signal, as the king pressed for an answer regardless of his status. He prepared to reveal his true self at last, removing the mask and stating his full name, Ugram Alvin Kashana. The king's face drained of all color, recognizing those golden eyes, and the royal guards erupted in absolute panic, shouting orders to surround the enemy prince. As spears pointed at Ugram from every direction, the king demanded an explanation from his daughter Iris, asking if she had been threatened or coerced, but she confessed that she brought Ugram here willingly, and her father was horrified by the incredible risk she had taken. He questioned her judgment, especially with war on the horizon, but Iris revealed the truth that Ugram had saved her life, leaving the king utterly speechless. As a flashback showed a monster nearly killing her, as a grim warning was given about their dangerous mission, this king learns that even the so-called child of God was an enemy, while a subordinate recounts Ugram's truly overwhelming power, and this blonde woman Iris declares he is their only key to victory. But the king refuses to place his trust in an enemy prince. A calm hand reaches out trying to de-escalate the rising tension, and Ugram agrees with Iris's assessment, asking for a chance to speak, which this king listens to, surprised by the unusual request. So he sits upon his throne and grants him a formal audience, and surrounded by guards Iris looks on nervously, while Ugram simply smiles, promising to offer them undeniable proof. Then a sudden immense pressure completely fills the room, as his friendly demeanor vanishes in an instant. And dark energy erupts from his body, blasting the guards away, which Iris watches in absolute paralyzing horror. Outside, the entire castle is consumed by a swirling dark aura, and she struggles to her feet completely and utterly stunned, because this sheer scale of his power is simply unbelievable. Yet Ugram stands calmly amidst the fallen unconscious soldiers. This king's hand clenches into a fist in pure fury, and he demands to know if this is meant to be a massacre, while Iris asks if this terrifying display is his true nature. But Ugram calls it a simple demonstration of his full strength, as this king glares down from his throne completely enraged. But Ugram raises a hand, saying that's not his ultimate goal. With a casual snap of his fingers, this entire company of royal guards are neutralized without a single casualty, and he offers his hand to the stunned Iris, helping her to her feet while assuring her he was careful, before he makes a solemn promise to the king that he will use this very power for the good of their kingdom. This king remains deeply suspicious of his true motives, so he offers a simple trade, his power in exchange for a quiet life, and besides he adds with a glance Iris is here, which leaves her completely stunned by his unexpected words, as he says the burden of her destiny is far too great for her to bear alone, and that she protected him without ever knowing who he truly was, for he remembers her kindness and her bravery from that day. An advisor recounts her incredible courage against a powerful monster, and this king admits her unyielding spirit moved him to act as well. But our boy already knows her story, her entire fate from the game, confessing that he's a huge fan of the holy hero Iris. Her eyes widen in utter disbelief at what she's hearing, and this king is completely floored by the bizarre confession, while this guards can't believe what they just heard him say, and a stunned, awkward silence fills the entire room, as her face turns a brilliant bright red, for she's completely flustered by the sudden public declaration. And this king's expression hardens watching his daughter's reaction, noting that she's nothing like her cold, stoic reputation. This king's knights stand at the ready, guarding him closely, as he worries they cannot possibly counter this terrifying new power, and this princess listens to it all with growing concern, turning to her father who sits silently on the throne, while Ugram tells them to take their time to decide. Turning to leave, but a sharp voice suddenly stops him. This Princess Iris lunges forward with a drawn sword, and Ugram is stunned by the completely unexpected attack, stumbling back, demanding to know why she would do such a thing, but she says his magic barrier will surely keep him safe, explaining that this is her way of proving her kingdom's own strength, and she raises her sword high, ready for a real fight, as Iris challenges Ugram to a formal duel. Her father, the king, is in a state of absolute shock, and Ugram can't believe what he's hearing her say, while this entire throne room watches in breathless silence, as this two of them face off on the wide stone balcony. He asks her what she's possibly trying to accomplish with this, but she just tells him to get ready to fight her seriously. So Yugram smirks unimpressed by the empty threat, offering her a handicap: he won't use his magic barrier. Iris plants her feet firmly, accepting the generous terms, and she leaps high into the air, her sword held high for a powerful strike. But Yugram moves in a blur to block her attack, and this clash of steel echoes loudly through the hall as he easily blocks her powerful downward strike, his eyes widening slightly, tracking her every single move, and she realizes his enhanced body can see her sword's path. As he analyzes her form, spotting a critical opening, targeting her collarbone with a precise thrust, and then her throat with another swift motion, leaving her shocked by his precise, ruthless targeting. This final battle between the story's hero and villain unfolds, and he's clearly enjoying playing the part of the final boss, while she knows she can't possibly win a direct fight. But she must do this to reassure the watching crowd of their own strength. So he parries another blow, acknowledging her divine power. Knowing her plan was simple, he wouldn't use magic against a sword, but even with that supposed advantage, her blade can't reach him. She puts all of her remaining strength into one last desperate swing, a final desperate attempt to turn the tides, knowing she just needs to land a single solitary hit. But he tells her that kind of predictable attack will never work. And he sidesteps her lunge with practiced ease, causing her to stumble, her momentum carrying her to the ground. On the floor, she insists that it's not over yet, but this tip of his wooden sword stops just inches from her throat, and he tells her that her impatience was her ultimate downfall, so she admits there's no point in continuing the fight, but he kneels down beside her, telling her she has good instincts, and Yugram boasts that he can teach her to be even better, which makes Iris question his blunt way of comforting her. But she has to admit that he is undeniably strong. Suddenly, she has a brilliant idea, declaring that Yugram will be her personal instructor and guard, reasoning that with the strongest as her teacher, she can become strong too, and he considers her logic for a moment and flatly refuses, so she smiles, pulling rank with a formal royal command, and when he hesitates, she demands another match right now as they bicker back and forth on the sunlit balcony. This guards murmur amongst themselves, this isn't the vile prince from the rumors. And from above, the king watches their exchange with a faint smile, until a voice finally calls a halt to their childish argument. This king praises their fair and honest duel, and he officially grants Yugram asylum within the palace walls, before putting Iris in charge of his personal care, and she smugly leads the defeated prince away. This king ponders the boy's very unusual attitude, as Yugram takes Iris's hand with a surprisingly gentlemanly gesture, which this king completely misreads as a sign of budding romance. And for a moment it seems everything is finally settled, but Iris is already eager to start their training immediately. Yugram insists that he is going to rest first, so she guides him to his luxurious new quarters, where he immediately flops onto the soft bed, absolutely delighted. But she tells him this room is very special because it's located right next to hers, and Yu is completely stunned by this shocking news. This next morning, Iris walks through the quiet castle grounds, where guards watch her, noting her early morning sword training, and they weep, moved by her divine dedication to her duty, for she carries the heavy weight of all their expectations. Sunlight streams into a lavish, unfamiliar bedroom, and inside, Yu is still sound asleep, dreaming happily about all sorts of delicious food, until a shadow suddenly falls over him and he sees Iris standing right beside his bed. As she announces it's time for their morning training, leaning in very close to wake him from his slumber, he jolts awake, confused by the incredibly early hour, and he demands to know how she knew he was already awake. Learning this attendant was listening carefully from the next room, as Iris holds up a small, shimmering earring, and he apologizes for falling asleep on her yesterday, but she reveals it's a magical disguise artifact, which he takes, agreeing that a mask is far too obvious. A flash of light envelops him as he puts it on, and his entire appearance begins to magically change, leaving Iris staring completely and utterly starstruck. So he asks how he looks, and she stammers that it really suits him. A hand gestures toward a nearby vanity mirror, and this blonde woman blushes, wondering if the disguise actually worked, when a flamboyant man appears behind her, admiring his own good looks, but she pushes him away, calling for the real Yu, noting that he seems to be wide awake now, and this man celebrates his successful little prank. A sudden cut takes us to the castle exterior, where in the courtyard Yu and Iris prepare for their training. And Iris declares her firm resolve to finally catch up to him, so Yu agrees, setting the terms, pure swordplay only. She lunges forward, shouting the name of her attack, and their blades meet with a sharp, ringing clang, as Yu's eyes narrow, reading her every single move, and he effortlessly flips right over her head, critiquing her predictable attack while still in midair before he lands perfectly behind her, giving her a quick thumbs up for her noticeable improvement. And flustered, she accepts the unexpected praise. From a nearby balcony, servants watch the scene in shock, as Yu calls an end to the session so they can have breakfast, which makes Iris hang her head, feeling defeated once again, but he tells her it's only natural she couldn't win yet, and her eyes flash with a renewed sense of determination. Yu smiles, praising her incredible fighting spirit, and he promises she will grow much stronger under his guidance, which makes Yu give a hesitant, flustered smile in return, causing a nearby maid to gasp in utter disbelief. Iris suddenly grabs him, asking if he's being serious, and she beams, thanking Yu and vowing to grow strong for him, so he turns away, blushing from the sudden close contact, and so his new incredibly hectic life begins. Every single morning Iris is ready and eager to train, and every single evening she's just as eager to continue. And she even wakes him from his sleep demanding more, so he complains about his severe lack of rest, but she's completely unbothered, dragging him from his bed ready to start their session immediately. As this training continues late into the night every night, until Yu finally snaps screaming about her insane non-stop schedule, he takes his complaint to a much higher authority, as Yu vents to the king about Iris's relentless drive, but her father only smiles immensely proud of her dedication, and Yu realizes the king is no help to him at all. This next day Iris arrives for their scheduled session, and she opens the door to a very strange sight. Finding Yu is protesting, holding a sign demanding a day off. As he explains, he needs a break, a real vacation from all this. And this concept of a break finally clicks for Iris. He makes one last desperate plea for some time to himself, and she agrees, granting him a day off as thanks for his help. But in exchange for this favor, she has a condition, and a suggestion is made for a trip into the nearby town, which leaves Yu stunned, but he really wants to go. So this blonde woman smiles, announcing she's coming with him too, insisting it's only to protect him from being questioned by the guards. And with that, she declares the plan is officially set. This door shuts, leaving Yu standing there completely bewildered, and outside she pauses for a quiet, private moment, as a single rose gleams in her intricately braided hair, and this full weight of the promise she just made hits her, as she blushes, realizing this is basically a date.